Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you, honey? My husband James asked. His smile stretched too wide, not quite reaching his eyes. I sat at my sister-in-law Nina's pristine dining table in her Nashville home, where we held our monthly family brunches. The coffee cup in front of me gave off a strange, almost metallic scent that instantly turned my stomach. My name's Christina, and at 29, I never thought I'd seriously question whether my own husband might be trying to poison me. But after 3 years of marriage, and far too many accidental cases of food poisoning, I'd learned to stay cautious, especially around Nina. She had a talent for crafting scenarios that left me sick or humiliated, always with that perfect, innocent smile, the same one James was wearing now. "How thoughtful of you," I replied, forcing a smile while my mind scrambled. The aroma wafting from the cup wasn't anything like coffee. It reminded me of last month, when a cup of tea at Nina's house had landed me in urgent care. The doctors found nothing conclusive, and Nina insisted she'd prepared the tea exactly as she always did. Now, from across the table, she stirred her own untouched coffee and watched me with sharp eyes. "James has become quite the barista lately," she said, smirking. "He's been trying out new brewing methods just for you." The way she emphasized "just for you" made my skin crawl. I'd noticed James spending more and more time at Nina's place lately, claiming they were planning a surprise for our anniversary. But something felt off. There were whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room, strange texts I caught glimpses of on his phone. And now, this coffee. I lifted the cup, pretending to sip while studying their expressions. James and Nina exchanged a quick glance, one that only confirmed my fears. Feigning surprise, I checked my phone. "Oh, would you look at that? I need to make a quick work call." "Nina, mind if I use your study?" As I walked past her, I deliberately stumbled, catching myself on the edge of the table. In the flurry of motion, I swapped our mugs. "I'm so sorry," gasped. "I'm such a klutz." Nina offered a tight smile. "Just try not to break anything in the study." I nodded and slipped away, my pulse pounding. From the study doorway, I had a clear view of the table. I waited, breath shallow, watching. Nina lifted the coffee cup to her lips. My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to scream, to snatch it from her hands. But I had to know. I had spent too many nights in emergency rooms, too many mornings curled in pain. Always after brunches. Always after meals she or James had made. It hadn't always been like this. When I first met James at a wedding 3 years ago, he was charming and sweet. Nina had been friendly too, inviting me into the family, helping plan the wedding. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The spilled drinks on my clothes during important events, the mysteriously overseasoned meals only I ate, the constant excuses for my symptoms. The worst was 2 months ago. Hospitalized after breakfast at their house. The doctors found something in my system they couldn't identify. James insisted I must have taken expired meds. But now I knew better. Nina's hand trembled as she set the cup down. Her face had gone pale. "James," she whispered, voice unsteady. "Something's wrong." James looked up, confusion morphing into horror as he realized what had happened. He shoved back his chair. "Nina, what's happening?" She stood, wobbled, then clutched the table. "James, what did you put in that coffee?" I stepped out of the study, phone already recording. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup," James murmured, barely audible, but in the silence his words echoed. Nina's eyes widened. "Call an ambulance," she gasped, sinking to the floor. "Please." "I can't." I dialed 911, my voice calm despite the chaos. "Emergency services. We need an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive. My sister-in-law is having a severe reaction to something in her coffee. She's conscious but shaking violently." I kept the call going, my phone angled to keep them in frame. Nina's usual icy composure had crumbled into raw panic. "You switched," she gasped, locking eyes with me. "You knew." "Help is on the way," the dispatcher assured me. Nina's body convulsed, James frantically kneeling beside her. his face ashen as their carefully crafted plan unraveled, right in front of me. James was unraveling by the second. "Nina, what's happening? That wasn't supposed to. I mean, it wasn't meant for." "Shut up, James," Nina snapped, her voice ragged with pain but edged with fury. For a moment, her anger overpowered her distress. "This is your fault. You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the board meeting. You promised it wouldn't be traceable." My blood turned to ice. The board meeting, where I was scheduled to pitch a proposal for a major client we'd both been after. The same account Nina had been gunning for at her firm, a direct competitor to mine. And suddenly everything snapped into focus. "The tea last month," I said slowly, my voice steadier than I felt. "The breakfast 2 months ago. Those weren't accidents, were they?" Nina doubled over with a groan, clutching her stomach. Her expression twisted in pain. "The tea was supposed to keep you home during the Johnson pitch," she hissed. "But you showed up anyway." She struggled to breathe, glaring at James. "You said we just had to discredit her, make her seem unreliable to clients. That's all." The rising wail of sirens echoed outside. James backed away from us, pale and panicked. "Nina, stop. You don't know what you're saying." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm saying," she slurred, her voice thick but defiant. "We've been planning this for months. Ever since Christina started outperforming me at every single meeting." She pointed a trembling finger at James. "You were supposed to make sure she drank it." The front door burst open. Paramedics rushed in, and I stepped aside to let them work. As they began treating Nina, I stopped the recording on my phone and emailed it to myself, and then to my lawyer. James stood frozen in place, the reality of their scheme crumbling around him. "I'll ride with her," I told the paramedics, my tone firm. "I want to make sure my sister-in-law gets the proper care." I met James's wide-eyed stare. "And I'm sure the doctors will be very interested in knowing exactly what was in that coffee." The ER at Nashville General was a controlled chaos of flashing monitors and hurried footsteps. I sat in the waiting room, my phone in hand, replaying Nina's confession. Her trembling voice. The desperation in her eyes. It was more than enough proof. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. "Family of Nina Anderson," a nurse called out. I stood up, noting James's continued absence. He'd mumbled something about parking the car 20 minutes ago, and hadn't returned. "I'm her sister-in-law," I said, following the nurse through the double doors. "How is she?" "She's stable," the nurse replied, though her face was tight. "But we found concerning levels of toxins in her system. The doctor would like to speak with you." Dr. Phillips was waiting outside Nina's room, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a calm authority. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "can you walk me through what happened before your sister-in-law fell ill?" Pulled out my phone. "I think it's better if you hear it for yourself." I hit play. As Nina's voice filled the hallway, her accusations, her confession, the doctor's expression shifted from clinical concern to stunned alarm. "This is very serious," she said, tapping quickly on her tablet. "The substance we detected isn't something that would accidentally end up in a drink. This was deliberate contamination." At that moment, James appeared at the end of the hall, pale and sweaty, clearly having heard her words. "Christina," he started, taking a shaky step toward me. "Please. Let me explain." "Stay where you are," Dr. Phillips snapped, hitting the nurse's call button. "Security to room 412, please." James raised both hands, voice breaking. "This is all a misunderstanding." But the truth was already out, and the damage had already been done. Nina was confused. She didn't know what she was saying. James tried to recover, but his voice was weak, unconvincing. I raised my phone, pulling up the texts I'd secretly forwarded from his phone a week ago. "Really? So these messages between you and Nina, discussing how to make sure I'm out of commission before the Henderson presentation, those were just friendly banter?" James paled. "You went through my phone. After finding that vial in your desk drawer?" "Absolutely," I said coldly. Then I turned to Dr. Phillips. Doctor, I've been hospitalized 3 times in the last 6 months for unexplained symptoms. Can you tell me if those symptoms align with what you found in Nina's system today? Dr. Phillips frowned. We'll need to run tests to compare, but based on preliminary results, there's a strong possibility. Security will ensure your husband stays available for questioning. 2 guards flanked James. He looked trapped, like a man watching his carefully constructed world fall apart. Nina and I, he began, his voice cracking. We were just trying to help. You were pushing too hard, taking every big account. Nina said. If we could just make you rest. By poisoning me. My voice was calm, but my hands trembled with rage. How long has this been going on? Was it you who tampered with my food at the Christmas party too? James didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was louder than any confession. Behind him, I could see Nina through the glass of her hospital room, now hooked up to monitors, her expression hollow with fear. The mask had slipped. Detective Mendoza is en route, Dr. Phillips said. She'll need statements from everyone involved. He nodded. The truth was finally unraveling, and there was no way to stop it now. Detective Mendoza arrived within the hour. Tall, composed, and commanding, she carried herself like someone used to cutting through lies. She listened quietly as I played the recording from brunch and showed her the forwarded texts. You mentioned previous hospitalizations, she said, flipping through her notes. Can you tell me more? I opened a document I'd been maintaining in secret for months. The first was in February after dinner at Nina's house. I had severe stomach pain and dizziness. The second was in April, the tea incident. Then in June after breakfast with them. Each time the symptoms were similar, but just different enough that doctors couldn't identify the cause. Her eyes narrowed as she reviewed the timeline, the detailed notes I'd compiled. You've been keeping records. Ever since I noticed the pattern, I replied, then reached into my bag and pulled out a second phone. I also started carrying this. A backup phone, different number. I used it to record conversations. I have several recordings of James and Nina discussing their plans, although they're careful not to be explicit. Tapped on one. Nina's voice rang out. The Henderson account is worth millions, James. We can't let her screw this up. Just stick to the plan. A few days of illness should be enough. James's voice followed. I've got something stronger this time. She won't make it to the presentation. Detective Mendoza's jaw tightened. Through the window, Nina had regained consciousness. Her earlier confidence had vanished, replaced with naked fear. The hospital's toxicology screen identified several unusual substances, Mendoza said. Dr. Phillips believes some of them are synthetic compounds used in pharmaceutical testing. They're not publicly available. A commotion echoed down the hallway. James shouting, trying to push past security. I need to talk to my wife, he yelled. Christina, please. You don't understand. We were trying to help you. Mendoza stepped in front of him. Mr. Bennett, that's not help. That's attempted murder. James gave a bitter laugh. It wasn't murder. We just wanted her to slow down. Nina said. She said to poison me. Cut in. Because I was too successful. He looked at me, unable to speak. Behind the glass, Nina stared, calculating, probably wondering how she could spin this, how to salvage the mess. We'll need both of their phones, Mendoza instructed the guards. And post officers at both doors. No one leaves until we have full toxicology reports. Dr. Phillips entered Nina's room with a tablet in hand. The toxicology results confirm multiple synthetic compounds, she said grimly. The most concerning is a research-only substance used in pharmaceutical trials. It should never have been outside a lab. Nina's face went white. That's impossible, James muttered. You said it would just cause mild symptoms. Nothing permanent. Mild symptoms. Mendoza cut in, flipping open her notebook. Like the ones your wife has suffered for half a year. Another officer entered with an evidence bag. We found these in Mr. Bennett's desk at the Anderson marketing office. Inside were several small vials with clinical labels and handwritten dosage notes. The proof was all there now. What started as suspicion had become undeniable. My knees weakened as the full weight of their plan sank in. "You were documenting everything," I said, my voice hollow. "Like some kind of experiment." "It wasn't like that," Nina protested, but her voice trembled. "We just needed to track what worked. The first few times didn't do enough. You kept showing up anyway. So you increased the dosages," Detective Mendoza said, her eyes on the evidence bags. "Were you aware these substances could be lethal at higher concentrations?" Silence. Heavy and suffocating. Through the window, James sat slumped in a hallway chair, his head in his hands. Turned slowly. "This wasn't just about the Henderson presentation, was it?" My voice sharpened as the pieces snapped into place. "That client requested me specifically. You needed me out of the way. Permanently." Nina's face twisted into something between fear and rage. "You were ruining everything. I built that portfolio over years. And then suddenly, you show up and everyone wants you. So James said he could fix it," I said. "By killing me." The words hung in the air, thick with accusation. "We weren't trying to," Nina began. But Dr. Phillips cut her off. "The concentration of the substance in the coffee you consumed today," she said, eyes on Nina, "was significantly higher than what we've seen in samples from your previous hospitalizations. If you'd finished that cup, the results would have been severe. Potentially fatal." Detective Mendoza turned to her partner. "We need full warrants for their homes and offices. And contact the pharmaceutical company on those labels. Find out how these compounds were obtained." Nina slumped back into her pillows, drained. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she whispered. "James kept saying we just needed one more try." I stepped closer to her bedside. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled. "Every time I got sick, every client I lost, every meeting I missed, you were there. Watching. Taking notes. Measuring the damage. What kind of people do that?" The silence that followed was heavier than any answer. Down the hall, I heard James being read his rights as more officers arrived. Nina couldn't meet my gaze. "Detective," I said quietly, turning away. "I'm ready to give my formal statement." The trial lasted 3 weeks, though it felt like a lifetime. Every day, I sat in court as the prosecution laid out a methodical, airtight case against James and Nina. The evidence was undeniable. Bottles recovered from James's office, notes detailing symptoms and dosage adjustments, voice recordings, text messages. But what struck me most was their demeanor. Nina, always so composed, looked small and shrunken in the defendant's chair. James couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the floor while expert witnesses described the harmful and potentially lethal effects of the poisons they had used. Dr. Phillips's testimony sealed their fate. She presented a timeline that showed clear escalation. The doses had been increased with precision and intent. The pharmaceutical company later confirmed the substances had been stolen by a friend of James's, someone working in their research department. The defendants exhibited a calculated, escalating pattern of behavior, the prosecutor said during closing arguments. This was not simple sabotage. This was a systematic effort to harm Mrs. Bennett, an effort that could easily have ended in death. When the verdict was read, I felt no triumph, only a quiet, exhausted relief. Guilty. On all counts. Attempted murder, conspiracy, and unlawful possession of controlled substances. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. The premeditated nature of these actions, carried out over months against a family member, demands the maximum sentence. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs. 2 people I had once trusted, consumed by envy, undone by their own ambition, their business, their reputations, their freedom, all gone, all to destroy me. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, preparing to give the keynote speech. The irony wasn't lost on me. This exact moment, was what Nina had tried so desperately to stop me from achieving. The Henderson account, the one they'd tried to steal, had led to several high-profile contracts. I was now considered one of the top marketing executives in the region. Success isn't just about talent or hard work, I said, scanning the sea of faces. It's about integrity. About building real, lasting relationships rooted in trust. I paused, letting the silence draw them in. Sometimes the greatest threats to our success come from those closest to us. But surviving that makes you stronger. Afterward, several young professionals came up to ask for advice. One woman, her voice bright with admiration, asked how I'd stayed so composed throughout everything. I focused on what I could control, I told her. I trusted my instincts. I gathered the evidence. And I refused to let fear dictate my future. That evening, I received an email from the Henderson client. They were renewing their contract for another 3 years. I smiled, thinking back to that brunch. How differently things might have turned out if I hadn't listened to my intuition. That morning, the local paper ran a short article about James and Nina beginning their prison sentences. I didn't read it. Instead, I turned my attention to the newest client proposal on my desk, knowing the best revenge isn't about retribution. It's about moving forward and thriving in spite of the people who tried to hold you back.